Envision a dawn breaking over the savannas of Zambia. October 23rd, 2025. The air hums with the low rumble of earth movers, carving paths for a new highway that stretches like veins into the heart of the continent. You think it's progress, infrastructure, jobs, a leap toward prosperity. But beneath the dust, the truth stirs. This isn't aid. It's acquisition. China, with its $1 trillion belt and road web, now holds 20% of Africa's external debt. A noose tightening around 54 nations' necks. One missed payment, and a port in Djibouti or a mine in Congo slips away, not seized by force, but signed over in silence. The game ender? Africa, birthplace of humanity, is being remapped not by borders, but by balance sheets. Welcome to Death of Nations, where we trace the quiet fractures that doom empires. If this feels distant, wait, because the minerals fueling your electric car are the first domino. By the end, you'll ask, is Africa's future a partnership or a pawn in Beijing's grand design? For generations, the West painted Africa as a dark continent, a canvas of chaos needing salvation. Colonial maps drew lines like knives, extracting rubber from Congo, diamonds from Sierra Leone, leaving scars that still bleed. Post-independence in the 1960s, the illusion took hold. Freedom meant self-reliance, a fresh start under the sun. Enter the 2000s and the narrative softened. Aid from Washington, trade from Brussels, all under the banner partnership. Leaders like Nkrumah dreamed of unity. The OAU, then AU, whispered of Pan-African glory. Yet, beneath the rhetoric, dependency lingered. Loans from the IMF, strings attached like invisible chains. Then came China, not as savior, but as equal. The 2006 FOCAC summit in Beijing marked the pivot. No lectures on governance, just deals. $5 billion in credits, infrastructure for resources. The illusion? A win-win. Africa gets roads, rails, ports. China secures oil, copper, cobalt. By 2018, $60 billion pledged at FOCAC Beijing, with projects sprouting like baobabs. The Adax refinery in Niger, the Mombasa-Nairobi Railway in Kenya. African leaders toasted the shift. No more Western moralizing. But something stirs in the subtext, a pattern of promises that bind tighter than they free. The first fracture appears not in headlines, but in ledgers. The detonator drops here. As of October 2025, China's Belt and Road Initiative has sunk $153 billion into Africa since 2000. More than the US and EU combined in the last decade. But peel the surface. 12 African nations now owe Beijing over 20% of their GDP, with Zambia defaulting in December 2024 on a $6.3 billion haul, handing Mopani copper mines to Chinese hands. Angola? $42 billion in oil-backed loans since 2000, repayments eating 70% of exports. The bomb, this is an investment. It's indenture. FOCAC 2024 in Beijing pledged $60 billion more, but with strings, 80% of contracts to Chinese firms, labor mostly expatriate. Ethiopia's $13 billion dam, built by Sinohydro, now saddled with $1 billion annual repayments amid civil war. The quiet calculus. For every kilometer of rail, a chunk of sovereignty slips away. But hold that weight, because the story you've been sold is inside out. You see benevolence, bridges, hospitals, a counter to Western neglect. Flip it. These are lifelines laced with liens. The win-win mantra? A veil over resource grabs. Congo's $24 trillion mineral wealth, cobalt for your EV batteries, 70% of global supply, funneled through Chinese deals, with locals seeing 2% royalties while Beijing banks 98%. Kenya's standard gauge railway, $3.6 billion loan at 4.5% interest, now defaulted, with Mombasa Port as collateral. The reversal, aid isn't altruism, it's acquisition. By 2025, China owns 10% of Africa's mining output, up from 1% in 2000. The mind shifts. Empires don't conquer with cannons anymore. They do it with contracts, signed in boardrooms far from the dust they displace. But pause. Does this echo something deeper, a rhythm echoing across the ages? Breathe. See the thread? From the scramble for Africa in 1884, Europeans carving the continent like cake. to today's new scramble, where Beijing's loans replace gunboats. The pattern: power flows to the lender, not the land. Zambia's 2024 default? Not anomaly. Its archetype, the sixth African nation to restructure under Chinese pressure. But how does this web, from Lusaka to Luanda, tie the noose around Africa's throat? The strands converge in the Belt and Road's velvet vice. Launched 2013, it ensnared 40 African states by 2025, with $153 billion in loans. 60% infrastructure, 40% opaque contingent liabilities. Connect the ports. Djibouti's $1.4 billion facility, now 75% Chinese-owned after debt default, hosts PLA bases overlooking the Red Sea. Link the mines. In Guinea, Samanda's $20 billion iron ore project, Africa's largest, funneled to Chinalco, with locals displaced for development. The nexus. Debt servicing consumes 15% of Africa's GDP, per IMF 2025, with China holding 17% of the pie, up from 10% in 2015. FOCAC's June 2025 Changsha Summit, all 54 African nations, minus Eswatini, signed a manifesto resisting U.S. unilateralism, pledging to China's global initiatives, a coordinated front against Western sanctions. The link: from resource extraction to diplomatic allegiance, Beijing's web turns debtors into disciples. But the true inversion? This partnership was never mutual. It was meticulously mapped for mastery. The tale sold was liberation from Western yoke, no strings loans, mutual respect. Inverted. Strings are the strategy. Zambia's 2011 $11 billion debt, restructured in 2024, but with concessions: 51% stake in power utility to China's southern power grid. Angola's Chinese debt trap, $42 billion repaid in oil since 2002, yet GDP per capita stagnates at $2,000. The pivot: projects built for export, not equity. 70% of BRI roads haul minerals north, leaving locals with potholes and promises. By 2025, 12 nations in distress, per Boston University. Ghana, Ethiopia, Kenya teetering. The shock: Africa's agency erodes not by invasion, but invitation. Leaders like Kenya's Ruto sign deals in Beijing, returning with fanfare but handcuffs. Reversal sealed. The dragon's gift is a gilded cage, locking continents in cycles of dependency. Fury rises, but let's harness it wisely. The ache is palpable, a continent's promise, pilfered in plain sight. Feel the injustice of Congolese miners, hands raw for cobalt that powers Western EVs, earning $2 a day while Beijing banks billions. The quiet outrage of Zambian farmers, displaced for copper belts that feed foreign factories. Yet rage unchecked blinds. It's a fuel for Beijing's narrative of Western jealousy. Temper with truth. This isn't fate. It's finance, reversible if Africa unites. The weight settles. Deeper now. The child in Lusaka, school unfunded as debt repayments devour budgets. The fisherman in Djibouti, waters patrolled by PLA ships. The farmer in Guinea, land leased for 99 years to Sinohydro. Let the silence echo. Sovereignty isn't seized. It's surrendered one signature at a time. If Zambia's mines are China's now, and Angola's oil flows east, what piece of your world, your phone, your car, carries Africa's quiet surrender? Share which African story hits hardest. Nations don't perish in blaze. They dissolve in death's slow rain. China's shadow lengthens not through thunder, but the hush of unchecked ambition. Africa awakens, or the map redraws in red. This is Death of Nations, chronicling the unseen ends of eras. Like if the silence disturbs you, subscribe to witness the next fracture. Until the ink dries on the next deal, reflect.